Hi, my name is Aidan. In this video, we will build a simple to-do application and learn about the core concepts of Angular 2. We will also take a look at how modules and components are loaded, which is important to be able to use Angular 2 efficiently or even troubleshoot when something isn't working as expected. Before we can understand how the application is loaded, we need to cover the application building blocks. There are basically three concepts we need to understand here, and these are components, annotations, and controllers. And we will go through them each one by one. Angular 2 is all about components. Components are the mainstay. Essentially, components are ways for us to break down our UI into small reusable pieces so we're not doing the same thing over and over again. The way we represent components is through the elements. Right here we have a component called to-do-app, and when Angular 2 sees this element, it's going to execute the code above, which is the component definition. This block of code right here, we call it the component definition, has two main parts, the annotations and the controller. We'll go through each one of those one by one. The first part are the annotations. And the annotations are how we customize components. The first one is the component annotation, and this customizes this class. It tells Angular that this class belongs to the component. And it also tells Angular that this class has a selector, or the component has a selector of to-do-app. The second annotation we see is the view annotation. The view annotation tells Angular where our template for our component lives. So it will do a request and then we'll know that our template is at todos.html. So annotations allow us to customize our components. Let's start building our to-do application. We can see here that I've prepared our index.html file to load a Twitter Bootstrap style sheet along with 3 other JavaScript libraries. We'll talk more about them and what they do in a bit. But for now, let's focus on creating our main component along with our annotations. If we switch over to the browser, we can see that our libraries are loaded, but we don't have any app logic yet. So let's start writing some code. Let's create our first component. We'll start off by importing a couple of modules from the Angular library. The modules that we're going to be using will be component, view, and bootstrap. We'll declare our component as a class named to-do-app-component. We can now customize our class with our annotations. With the component annotation, we can give it a selector property with a value to-do-app. This will tell Angular to look for a custom element in the index.html file named to-do-app. We will also tell it with a view annotation that this component's view is located at app.html. And when this module is loaded, it will make a request to get that template. And last but not least, we're going to need to call the bootstrap function, since this is our root component, and pass in to-do-app component. To start loading this application, we're going to need to give it an entry point for the system.js library. We do so by calling system.import and pass in app. If we switch over to our browser now and refresh the page, we can see that 2 new requests were made for app.js and app.html. We still don't have any app logic, but before we implement that, let's talk a bit more about our controller. Annotations allowed us to customize our component, but we need to have a backing. When we create our template, we're going to be calling functions and we're going to be accessing properties, and all of those sit on our controller. So this is the actual class. In this case, I'm creating a to-dos array, which is an array of string, which is a type for TypeScript. And then inside the constructor, we just initialize it with two initial string elements. And then we have a function that allows us to push onto the to-dos array. So this is the backing of the components view. Let's take a look at our demo to-do application and talk briefly about the libraries that we load. System.js is a shim for the ES6 module system. It's responsible for loading modules from the server into the browser. We also load Tracor, which is required by the Angular framework in its alpha stage. Tracor is a JavaScript next to JavaScript of today compiler that allows you to use features from the future today. Without looking at the Angular code, we can guess that it uses ES6 Plus features that needs to be runtime transpiled into ES5. The essential line where we start to load our application is right here on line 12. This will tell the module loader to go ahead and grab app.js and run it. Before we dive deeper into the loading process, let's talk about this custom element first, the root component and the component hierarchy. Components are organized in a hierarchy, and it always starts with a component at the top. That component can have child components, and the child components can have its own components, and it can nest in as many layers as necessary. If you are familiar with React.js, this will be familiar to you. The way that Angular processes this is that it goes along and finds a custom element. In this case, the custom element is to-do-app. Angular has loaded up the component for to-do app, and using the selector, it matches that up with a custom element and expands that out into the view that was given. At that point, Angular continues processing down until all the custom elements are expanded. In this example, we only have one level of components, which is the main to-do app component. Let's pick up from where we left off on line 12. System.import will start loading app.js. The class to-do app component is declared here, containing the app logic. More importantly, at the bottom of this file, on line 45, we trigger the loading by calling the bootstrap function and passing in the to-do app component. The component annotation at the top will match the selector property with a custom element to-do-app in index.html, which will expand to the view template referenced from the view annotation. This process would continue for all subcomponents if we'd have any. But for this simple demo, we only load one component. Let's switch over to the browser and look at the actual requests being made. On the initial page load, the first script that we load is Tracor followed by system.js and the Angular framework itself. We can then see the ES6 module loading system kick in and do 3 XHR requests to get app.js, models.js, and app.html. And our application is bootstrapped and up and running. And just to make sure that we aren't cheating here, let's add a couple of to-dos. Complete them and delete them. In this video, we built a simple to-do application and learned about the basic building blocks of Angular 2. We have also dived deeper into how the application is bootstrapped. Components are ways for us to break down our UI into small and reusable pieces. Annotations are how we customize components, and controllers are the backing of the component's view, where the properties and methods sit, the app logic if you will. We have also seen how Angular processes components in a hierarchical manner, starting with a single topmost custom component and then expanding all the subcomponents from there.